All right, one of my all-time favorite components, the dialog component. Let's have a look at this. But first, we need something that's actually going to open that dialog. So how about a Q dash button? And then when this is clicked, we can say show dialog is equal to true. So we're going to have to create that data in a moment. And let's set a label equal to show dialog. Then I can come down here, say setup, and we're going to have to yank ref out of here. And then we can say const show dialog is equal to a reference. That will be false by default. Return show dialog so that it's accessible in the template. And there we go. When we click on this, that is now being set to true, but we don't have a dialog yet. So let's come down here and say Q-dialog. And then we can say V-model. So yes, a dialog can model some data. And it's going to model show dialog there. Click on the button. And now it shows, but there is nothing inside of it. So we literally just get a gray background. And that's intentional. The dialog button is basically presuming nothing. It's trying to do as little as possible. So usually you're going to throw a Q-card in there. And then maybe a Q-card-section. And this can have, for example, whatever text you like. So I'm just going to whack in some lorem ipsum. By the way, if you're using VS Code, you can probably just type in the word lorem, and then you get this abbreviation, so you can click on that and quickly just whack in some text. Super handy. All right, let's click on that button, and now we have a dialog with some content, and it looks really, really nice by default. What else can we do? Well, we could add a Q-card-actions down here, and inside of there, let's have a button that's going to close this dialog. So how about a label of close? That seems appropriate. Usually card actions are going to be flat, so let's set that to flat. And we can say that when this is clicked, show dialog is equal to false. All right, simple as that. Let's open this up and let's close it down. Cool. So I can click wherever I like. Nothing happens until I click on the close button. What else can we do? Well, it turns out there's actually a nicer way to do this. We can say v-close-popup. And that's going to do the same thing. It's a little bit easier to write, and it still works just the same. So I love this. And by the way, this doesn't just work for dialog components. It works for basically any pop-up within Quasar. So this is really, really handy to know this directive. v-close-popup. All right, what else can we do? Well, you might want this button inside of a toolbar. That's a common pattern. So let's cut that button, get rid of the Q-card actions, and then say here Q-toolbar and whack that button directly in there. All right, so we got that close button showing up. And that's cool. What else? How about we come in here and say Q-toolbar-title, and I'm going to set the title to more info. And you may remember from one of the other videos that the Q toolbar title actually takes up all of the space here. So it's going to push this button over to the edge. Super, super handy. And now we can change this to an icon, because that's going to be very obvious what it does. How about close? And then we can make it round and get rid of the label as well. Save that, and let's have a look at it. And there we go. Really, really nice. What else can we do? Well, maybe you think that this toolbar is a little bit thick. So let's just add a class on there to show it. Class is equal to background-primary. I actually think that looks really nice, and this is what I use for a lot of my applications. And then just add in text-white. Yeah, I think that actually looks really, really nice. However, you might want this to be thinner. Maybe that suits the style of your app. You could add here Q-bar, change this from a toolbar title to simply the text like that. Save it. Let's have a look at it. Very nice. And now we want to push this close button all the way to the edge. So let's add in here Q-space. And I might also make the size of this small, just so it fits nicer. We might even make it dense. And there you have it. Now we've got a slightly smaller title. I think that looks really, really nice. What else can we do? Well, sometimes you don't want the user to be able to close this dialog without taking action. Sometimes there are important events in your application where you might want to do that. And that's why we also have, if I come in here, persistent. Save it, and now if I try and click out of this, it's not going to close. We have to call the action ourselves now within the dialog. So for example, pressing this close button will still work. This is particularly useful once again if you want to have like an input and then the user has to input some data there that is correct, and then press OK before this dialog is going to close. So there's that as well. What else do we have? The opposite of persistent, you could say, is seamless. And seamless basically opens the dialog without that background shadow, and it allows you to click around and do other stuff in the application. So I can select text here, I can do whatever else I want in the app, and this dialog is basically seamless. It's not trying to take control of the application. So we can close that now. This is usually used with something like position is equal to bottom. So now it's showing up from the bottom. We can click around, especially if you had like a podcast app and you wanted to play something here. So you'd have some play controls and maybe a progress bar and a pause button. This would be a great example of that. So the user can still go around the website, start doing other stuff, and then close it out when they're done with it. And by the way, position can also be right, left, and also top as well. So there's right, and then we can also do top. Cool. And notice that it handles the animations for you as well. So when I go show dialog, it's showing from the correct position by default when I set position to top. I mean, Quasar really has done an amazing job thinking of all of these little details for us. It's really wonderful to use. All right, crossing those out, we've also got maximized. Maximize means that when we click on this button, we get a dialog that takes up the entire screen. Easy to use, super handy. We've also got different transitions. So if I get rid of maximize and say transition hide, we can change that to a slide dash up. And then transition show could be a slide dash down. Save that. Let's take a look at it. And there we go. So now it's coming in from the top and disappearing. Probably looks even better to flip that actually. Let's make that down and then show up. So it shows from the bottom and then it goes away. It's like a cheeky little dialogue. I like that transition. Another one we can do is something like rotate. And I'll copy paste that in there. And it's going to rotate out of nowhere. And that's pretty much it for transitions. You can check out the doc if you want to know a little bit more about what transitions you have available to you. All right, let's move on to scrolling because this is something that gives people a lot of grief when they're dealing with dialogues. However, Quasar does an amazing job solving this problem. So if we jump down to this cue card section here, let's imagine that we have more text. So I'll come in here and go Control-Shift-Enter to wrap that inside of a div. And I'll have to come back again. And let's say V-4, I in, and then a number, for example, 15. This is just a quick way to repeat content. And now I can set the key equal to I. And that's just going to create 15 versions of this text in here. And there we go. Now, there's a problem here. Notice that when I scroll up and down, we now lose this toolbar at the top. And that's not cool because I want to be able to press that button to close it. So what can we do about that? In fact, I might change this to 25 just to make the example a bit more full. Yeah, there we go. Well, what we can actually do here is make this a scroll area. And that's so easy to do. We just say class is equal to scroll, save it, and we're also going to have to add a style as well. So by default, that won't actually work. We need to say max height is equal to, for example, 60 view h. So it has to actually have a set height on it for this to work. So let's save it, open it up, and now we can scroll through this whilst maintaining this top toolbar. And this is particularly helpful also if you have a Q-card-actions. And a classic example of this is a user agreement, where they can basically scroll down, but you might want the accept button to be there already. So then you could say Q-button is equal to a label of accept. And now let's show that. And there we go. We can scroll up and down here, but the accept button is still there. And then, of course, when you click that, you'd say V-close-pop-up. Super handy. Oh, this next one's really cool. I got this from the Quasar docs. They got this section called Inception, which I just think is such a funny name for this. We can do dialogue Inception. So let's add another Q-dialog under here. By the way, this is such an annoying problem to solve yourself if you have to do it yourself. So I'm so glad that Quasar has handled it for me. V-model Inception. All right, so now let's come down here and model Inception. Inception. Nice. Come down there and paste it in. All right, so now we're modeling that. We want to add some content as well. And then how about we just make it a Q-card, a Q-card, dash section, and then we can say in here, Inception, ... And then maybe, ooh, that was weird. Q-button, and then at click is equal to, and then we can hide this. Actually, let's just use v-close pop-up there. All right, so now we've got this basic dialog that just shows the text Inception and has a button that allows us to close it. So we should probably put a label on this button saying close. Now, what we can actually do here is have another button here. This is so cool. Q-button, let's make it flat, and let's give it a label equal to Inception. Save that, and then when this is clicked, Inception, so the Inception dialog will be equal to true. Okay, so what are we doing here? Basically, we have a dialog with a button called Inception. When we click on that button, this Inception button, we want to open another dialog. Usually, you would expect this to not really work properly, but with Quasar, it just works. You get this second dialog, then you can close that, and then you can close this dialog. Everything just works nicely out of the box. What else can we do? Well, we can say, for example, full width on our dialog. So let's come up here and say class. Oh, we don't actually need a class. We can say full-width. And now that's going to go full width. Leaves a little bit of space around the edges, so you can click there to close it. Especially good for mobile devices. We can also say full-height. Let's take a look at that. And this is kind of like maximized, but you've got a little bit of space around the edges. So I often actually use this. It's really nice to play around with. And another thing you might want to do is set the width and the height manually. So let's get rid of these. Come to the card, and we can say style is equal to, let's start with a width of 700 pixels. And let's say the max width, though, is equal to 80 view width. Save it. Open the dialog. That's going to be a maximum of 700 pixels in width. And there we go. Oh, sorry, not a maximum, a width of 700 pixels. But when the view width gets below 80, it's basically going to maintain that width. There we go. So it'll look really nice on a mobile device as well. However, what I often like to do is say, what is the optimal viewing width? So if for your app that is 700 pixels, I will set the width to 700 pixels and then add a class here saying full-width. This is my favorite way to do it. Now when I go show dialog, it's going to maintain the best viewing experience, okay? So if we get to 700 pixels, it then stops growing. So I use this pattern all the time in QDialogs. It's kind of like my magic trick. Full width, and then set the max width with a number that is basically the optimal viewing width. That's how I like to think of it. And if you do that, it's always going to look good, even on small devices and on larger devices. It's not going to take up too much width and look crappy. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. We've explored some cool stuff with the dialog component. I'll see you in a future video.